so this is my makeup tracker for 232 to the end. Wow, the ending was a shocker. I really was taken away with that. But just kind of to note the structure of like this section. I don't know if it was on purpose, but I also thought it was interesting how it's kind of like a cash sandwich, because on 232 it starts with cash, and then the last chapter also ends with cash, and in between there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters in between. So I thought it was interesting because after this, like after Darl burns down the barn or whatever, we really don't hear a lot from him besides his like really weird narrative where he kind of like refers to himself as like a third person or whatever. And so like I feel like Cash kind of takes over, and it's interesting because from the beginning of the book, Cash always seemed like the dumb one to me, because he well, not dumb, but like he just was very like matter of fact about everything. He didn't really dive deep into like a lot of like philosophical thought or whatever. But like in the end, he really like seems to express himself more, and he kind of takes over like what's happening, or takes over explaining what happens in the book. Let's see, what should I mention? Oh, and in the beginning I thought it was interesting because he said like it was either to send him to Jackson or have Gillespie sue us because he knowed some way that Darl set fire to it. So this was before he found out that Dewey Dell like was the one that told Gillespie about the barn burning. But I thought it was interesting how it's like there's these like this like there's a play on like what characters know and what characters don't know. And I feel like that's like kind of like a theme that goes throughout the story, like where it's like there seems to be some ways that information is passed around without characters like actually speaking or knowing or telling. Obviously, we find out later that Dewey Dell did tell Gillespie, like physically, that Darl was the one who burnt down the barn. And it was interesting too in that section where they find out that Dewey Dell was the one who told on Darl, because I think she was described as like being closest to Darl, like the one who liked Darl the most, yet she was the one who like kind of pounced on him like a wildcat, basically. That's how she was described. And yeah, I guess she was more eager to do that because of her secret, like her pregnancy and her wanting to hide it, and Darl being the only one knowing about it. Oh, also in the last section, Ants really is the one that is the most unlikable. I definitely hate him the most after this book. Obviously because it's just like him just treating his children really badly, and like it's not just my opinion, obviously, like other characters outside the family also notice how bad Ants of a parent as Ants is as a dad, basically. Yeah, I think it was Peabody, right? It's like, I'd be damned if the man that let Ants Buntram treat him with raw cement ain't got more spare legs than I have. Basically, like, Peabody's just like, this is like wild, like why would you set a leg with cement, basically. But even more, he's basically talking and saying how like Ants is really just a terrible parent, like treating Ants that bad, like telling to Cash. And Cash is like selfless to a fault. He says like, it never bothered me much, he said, and then Peabody says, you mean it never bothered Ants much. And that's true, because Ants only thinks of himself, really. He doesn't really think about his children or anyone else. And yeah, it's really interesting because Cash seems like super selfless and like giving, whereas Ants is like the complete opposite. So yeah. Oh yeah, and it's like later Peabody adds like, no more than it bothered him to throw that poor devil, being Darl, down in the public street and handcuff him like a damn murderer. And don't tell me he ain't going to bother you to lose 60 odd square inches of feet to get that concrete off. Yeah, basically it's like the kids are the one who are giving and giving and giving, and Ance is the one who's just taking, basically. Like, he doesn't help, like, manual labor, like, he doesn't help at all. And, like, in the river crossing house, he was being, like, really unhelpful and just saying, like, really obvious things. Yeah, he just seems to be the selfish one, and I guess it's understandable now why Addie, like, wanted to, like, get revenge on him, because it seems that he took from her too, took her youth, took her life, her aspirations, everything, basically. So in a sense, it makes sense why she'd be so upset with him. But it seems like this whole, like, pilgrimage that she's making her children take to bury her, it's more a punishment on the children and on Ance, even though her intended punishment was to basically hurt Ance and, like, basically hurt him, and yet at the end it's the kids who suffer. Isn't that sad? I don't know. I just thought it was sad. Yeah. And it's funny too, because Peabody says, God almighty, why didn't Ance carry you to the nearest sawmill and stick your leg in the saw? That would have cured it. Then you all could have stuck his head into a saw and cured a whole family. I guess that really just is more a reflection on how Peabody views the Bundrins. Like, I guess he doesn't see it very highly of them. And in general, I don't think the city people look very highly on the Bundrins either, just because they're country people. Like, I think his name is, Ski, or, like, McGowan or something. Yeah. Something like that, McGowan. It says McGowan, but, like, his buddy calls him Ski or something. Basically, like, in his chapter, he basically, kind of looks down on Dewey Dell when she comes into the pharmacy, and he's like, oh, she's just a country woman. And, like, he even said, she looks pretty good for a country girl, like, kind of implying that country girls don't look good generally, like, so that's kind of like, what's it called? It's like an insult hidden in a compliment, kind of. So, yeah. And also, just the way he sexualizes her, and, like, keep in mind, like, Dewey Dell's, like, a teenager, so it's kind of gross how he's, like, I couldn't tell nothing except she had a good leg against the light, it's, like, really gross. And in a way, it seemed kind of like he was talking about her to his, like, coworker or whatever, kind of in a way that was, like, talking about livestock, and that kind of goes back to the metaphor of how, like, Dewey Dell is a cow, like, a metaphorical cow in this instance, just because they're, like, talking about her, like, in a way that's, like, oh, she's got a good leg, she's got good looks, but it's, like, kind of, like, talking about how, like, a cow is, like, it's, like, strong and healthy or whatever, like, when you buy livestock, that's kind of, like, the stuff you look at to make sure they're healthy and stuff. So, I don't know. That part was just kind of gross. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, and I thought that was interesting, too, the part where Vardaman has to wait outside of the pharmacy late at night while Dewey Dell is inside, and stuff. I thought it was interesting how he literally saw a cow, like, crossing the street and basically, like, I don't know, that kind of just, I don't know if the cow is real, just because Vardaman is similar to Darl in the way that he's very, like, philosophical and thinks about things, like, in a very nuanced way, so I feel like that cow could have almost been, like, a symbol rather than, like, a physical cow that was actually in the street, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Also, it's really interesting because there's a lot of parallels to the way that Vardaman talks and the way that Darl talks, especially since, Vardaman's chapter on 249 is right before Darl's chapter, and his language is just all about Darl. It's like, Darl, Darl, Darl. It just keeps repeating that. And then it's like, it goes in circles, basically. He's talking in circles. He's like, so Vardaman says, he had to get on the train to go to Jackson. I have not been on the train, but Darl has been on the train. Darl's my brother, Darl. And then on the very next chapter is Darl's chapter, and then Darl starts, Darl has gone to Jackson. Like, it mirrors that same language that Vardaman is using, so it's almost as if, like, they're, like, very single, like, one-minded, kind of, or, like, maybe, like, Darl speaking to Vardaman in the way that, in that telepathic kind of way, just like how he's able to, like, communicate to Dewey Dell and that sort of, I don't know, it just seems really weird how, like, even when Darl's, like, gone and on the train, he still has, like, an influence on, like, their minds and stuff. So yeah, he definitely seems like an all-powerful, like, knowing more than he should kind of person. Yeah. Oh, and it's really interesting too because there's another part where they basically talk about Darl, and then like right after they say he, but like a capital he. So then I inferred that was not Darl, but God. But then it's like they talk about God and Darl in such a very like close like in such close proximity that it almost seems like they're conflated with each other. You know, I don't know what chapter it was, but I definitely saw it here. Oh, right, here it is. Here it is. So, Oh, so basically it's like, um, it was Jules' horse on page 233. It was Jules' horse was traded to get her that nigh to town, and in a sense it was the value of the horse that Darl tried to burn up. But I thought more than once before we crossed the river and after how it would be God's blessing if he, capital He, did take her out in our hands and get shut of her in some clean way. And it seemed to me that when Jewel worked to get her out of the river, he was going against God in a way. And then when Darl seemed that it looked like one of us would have to do something, I can almost believe he'd done it in a right way. So it's almost like Darl was doing God's will or acting as God in a way, which I thought was really interesting because he seems to have like very godlike powers where he knows things, sees things, like goes into times and different like out of time basically, and is able to like know what people think and insert his thoughts into their minds too. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, this is Cash's chapter where he says, "Sometimes I think it ain't none of us pure crazy and ain't none of us pure sane until the balance of us talks him that away. It's like it ain't so much what a fellow does, but it's what the way the majority of folks is looking at him when he does it." So I guess he's basically saying like Darl, he wasn't really crazy until people saw him as crazy, and I thought that was interesting because it's like kind of like the chicken or egg situations. Like, are you really crazy, or do people treat you crazy until you become crazy? I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting too. What else? Oh, this is a 12-minute video. I should end it.